I met Kevin at the pizza place where we both worked during college. He was this earnest, careful guy who always showed up early and stayed late, the kind of person who actually read the employee handbook and followed every single rule. Most of the other guys I dated were more spontaneous, more exciting maybe, but Kevin had something different. Stability. When he talked about the future, he meant it. When he said he'd call, he actually called. After watching my parents tear each other apart in their divorce, Kevin's predictability felt like a warm blanket. We dated for 3 years before he proposed, and even then, he was cautious about it. He'd seen his own parents' marriage fall apart when he was 12, so he wanted to be absolutely sure we were ready. I appreciated that, honestly. Kevin wasn't the type to rush into anything without thinking it through completely. When we finally got married, I knew he was committed for life. That kind of devotion is rare, and I wasn't stupid enough to throw it away. The first year of marriage was everything you'd expect from newlyweds. Kevin supported my decision to go back to school for my master's in literature, even when it meant tighter finances and me being gone for evening classes 3 nights a week. He'd have dinner waiting when I got home, always asking about my professors and my thesis topic with genuine interest, even though I could tell he didn't really understand why I found Victorian novels so fascinating. But he tried, and that meant everything. I got pregnant pretty soon after the wedding, which wasn't exactly planned, but felt right. Kevin was over the moon about becoming a father. He bought parenting books and started baby-proofing the apartment before I was even showing. Watching him get so excited about something as simple as picking out a crib made me fall in love with him all over again. This was what I wanted, a partner who would be completely devoted to our family. But graduate school opened up a whole new world for me. The other students were older, more sophisticated, more intellectually curious than anyone I'd ever been around. They talked about literature like it mattered, like it could change the world. Kevin tried to engage when I'd come home full of ideas from class discussions, but I could see his eyes glaze over when I started explaining postmodern narrative theory or feminist literary criticism. He'd nod and smile, but we both knew he was just being polite. That's when I met Bruce. He was auditing one of my seminars, some kind of visiting scholar working on his own research project. Older than me, by maybe 10 years, with this confidence that comes from actually knowing things, actually having lived in the world. When he disagreed with something our professor said about Virginia Woolf, he didn't just raise his hand politely like the rest of us. He made his point with this quiet authority that had everyone leaning forward to listen. After class, he came up to me and said my comment about unreliable narrators was the most insightful thing anyone had said all semester. When was the last time Kevin had called anything I said insightful? When was the last time Kevin had even used the word insightful in conversation? Bruce suggested we grab coffee to continue the discussion, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely intellectually stimulated. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long walks around campus talking about books and ideas and what we wanted to accomplish with our work. Bruce had traveled, had lived in different cities, had actually published articles in literary journals. He treated my opinions like they mattered, like I was someone worth taking seriously. With Kevin, I always felt like I had to translate my thoughts into simpler terms, dumb them down so he could follow along. With Bruce, I could be as complex and analytical as I wanted. I knew it was heading somewhere dangerous, but I convinced myself it was just intellectual friendship. Kevin was at home setting up the nursery and reading about infant sleep schedules, being his usual, responsible self. And here was this fascinating man who wanted to discuss the intersection of gender and power in 20th century literature over wine at 11 p.m. Was I really supposed to pretend that wasn't more stimulating than conversations about baby formula and pediatrician recommendations? The night it happened, I told Kevin I was staying late at the library to work on my thesis. Not technically a lie. I had been planning to work on my thesis, but Bruce had invited me to his hotel room to see some rare first editions he'd acquired for his research, and the opportunity to examine books I'd only read about in academic papers was too good to pass up. At least that's what I told myself. 1 glass of wine turned into 2. and before I knew it, Bruce was sitting closer to me on the couch, his hand on my knee as he explained the significance of marginalia in a 1920s edition of The Wasteland. When he kissed me, I should have stopped it. I should have thought about Kevin at home, probably assembling the changing table or organizing baby clothes by size. But I didn't think about Kevin. For once, I wasn't thinking about anyone else's needs or expectations. I was just present in the moment with someone who saw me as more than a wife and future mother. It was purely physical. That's what I kept telling myself afterward. It didn't mean anything beyond two adults enjoying each other's company for a few hours. Bruce wasn't looking for a relationship any more than I was looking to leave my marriage. We were both getting something we needed: intellectual connection with a physical component, and then we were both going back to our regular lives. No harm done. I went home to Kevin that night and slipped into bed next to him, watching him sleep peacefully, completely unaware that anything had changed. And really, nothing had changed. I still loved Kevin. I still wanted our baby and our life together. What had happened with Bruce was completely separate from all of that, like reading a really good book that transports you somewhere else for a few hours, but doesn't make you want to abandon your real life. Kevin never suspected anything. Why would he? I wasn't acting guilty or distant. If anything, I was more affectionate than usual, grateful for his steadiness and reliability after the intensity of being with Bruce. When Bruce finished his research and left town a few weeks later, I felt a little sad but mostly relieved. It had been a beautiful interlude, but it was over, and now I could focus completely on my family. Taylor was born 8 months later, and Kevin was the most devoted father I'd ever seen. He got up for every middle of the night feeding, changed every diaper without complaint, spent hours just staring at her in wonder. Watching him with our daughter, I knew I'd made the right choice in marrying him. Biology is just genetics. Real fatherhood is about showing up every day, and Kevin showed up in ways that impressed even me. As Taylor grew up, Kevin's devotion never wavered. He was the dad who never missed a school play, who helped with every homework assignment, who knew all her friends' names and remembered their birthdays. When my writing career started taking off and I had to travel for book tours and literary conferences, Kevin handled everything at home without ever making me feel guilty about being away. He understood that my work was important, even if he didn't always understand the work itself. The years passed, and our life settled into a comfortable routine. Kevin worked his steady job, I wrote my books, and Taylor grew into this amazing teenager who was smart and funny and had somehow inherited the best qualities from both of us. Or at least the best qualities from me and Kevin, since Kevin was the one who'd actually raised her. Sometimes I'd catch Kevin looking at Taylor with this expression of complete adoration, and I'd feel a tiny flutter of something that might have been guilt. But then I'd remind myself that he was her real father in every way that mattered. He'd been there for every milestone, every scraped knee, every teenage drama. The fact that they didn't share DNA was irrelevant. If anything, Kevin's love for Taylor was more meaningful because it was chosen, not just biological instinct. Last spring, I went on a book tour for my latest novel. It was going really well. Good crowds, positive reviews, interest from some bigger publishers. I was gone for almost 3 weeks, hitting bookstores and literary festivals across the Midwest. Kevin and Taylor held down the fort at home, sending me pictures of their cooking disasters and movie nights. They seemed to be having their own little adventure while I was having mine. When I got back, Taylor was practically bouncing with excitement about some project she'd been working on while I was away. She'd bought these DNA testing kits, the 23andMe ones that were all over the internet, and wanted us to do them as a family. She thought it would be fun to see what our ancestry looked like, maybe discover some interesting family history. My first reaction was panic, though I tried to hide it. "Why didn't you wait for me?" I asked, probably more sharply than necessary. Taylor looked hurt, and Kevin gave me this puzzled look, like he couldn't understand why I wasn't excited about the idea. I tried to backtrack, asking about the terms and conditions, suggesting maybe we should research the company more thoroughly before sending them our genetic information. But Taylor had already convinced Kevin to do his test, and they'd both spit in their little tubes like it was the most natural thing in the world. They were looking at me expectantly, waiting for me to join their fun family science experiment. What choice did I have? If I refused or kept making excuses, that would be even more suspicious. So I did the test, sealed up my tube, and mailed it off, telling myself that maybe the results wouldn't be conclusive. Maybe 16 years was long enough that any questions about Taylor's paternity would be impossible to answer definitively. But of course, that's not how genetics works. When the results came back, Kevin opened them with Taylor, both of them excited to compare their ancestry percentages and see what interesting family connections they might discover. I tried to make basic small talk, asking general questions about the format, and suggesting we look at the results more carefully later when we had more time. But Taylor was already pulling up the family connection features, and Kevin was staring at his phone with this confused expression that made my stomach drop. He kept refreshing the page like he thought there might be some technical error. "This is weird," he said finally. "It's showing Taylor as my niece, not my daughter." Taylor laughed and grabbed the phone. "That's obviously a mistake. These things aren't perfect, right, Mom?" I made some non-committal comment about technology being unreliable, but Kevin wasn't letting it go. He'd pulled up the help section and was reading about how the relationship predictions worked, getting quieter and more focused with every paragraph. That night, after Taylor went to bed, Kevin didn't say anything about the DNA results. We went through our normal routine. He did the dishes while I graded some student papers I'd been putting off. We watched half an episode of some crime show. We brushed our teeth and got ready for bed like any other Tuesday. But I could feel him thinking, could practically hear the gears turning in his head. The next morning, Taylor had already left for school when Kevin came into the kitchen where I was making coffee. He had his laptop open to the 23andMe results, and his face was pale but determined. "We need to talk about this," he said, turning the screen toward me. I was trembling, though I tried to hide it. The words wouldn't come at first. After 16 years of never having to explain myself, I didn't even know where to start. "It was a long time ago," I finally managed. "Before Taylor was born. I didn't know the guy. It wasn't anything special. It was purely physical, just something that happened once." Kevin stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "You're telling me you had an affair?" "It wasn't an affair. It was one afternoon with someone from my graduate program, an older guy I barely knew." "It didn't mean anything, Kevin. You're Taylor's real father. You're the only father she's ever known, the only father she wants." But I could see in his eyes that something fundamental had shifted. He wasn't angry. Exactly, he was just distant, like he was looking at a stranger instead of his wife of 17 years. "The entire dynamic of the family has changed," he said quietly. "Everything I thought I knew about our life together, none of it was real." "That's not true," I said. "Our life is real. Our family is real. Taylor loves you, Kevin. You raised her. You are her father." But Kevin was already shaking his head, already pulling away from me emotionally in a way that made my chest tight with panic. This wasn't how this conversation was supposed to go. He was supposed to be upset, sure, but then he was supposed to realize that our family was more important than some genetic technicality from 16 years ago. Instead, Kevin went upstairs and started packing a suitcase. I followed him, trying to make him understand that he was overreacting, that we could work through this like adults. But he wouldn't even look at me. He just kept folding clothes and putting them in the suitcase like I wasn't even there. "Where are you going?" I demanded. "I don't know," he said. "But I can't be here right now." He left before Taylor got home from school. Just packed his stuff and drove away, like our 17 years together meant nothing. When Taylor came through the door that afternoon, asking where Kevin's car was, I had to explain that her father had left because of something I'd done before she was born. The look on Taylor's face broke my heart. She immediately blamed herself, convinced that buying the DNA kits had somehow caused this disaster. When Kevin finally called her that evening, I could hear her crying and apologizing. "I'm really sorry, Dad. I didn't know this would happen." Kevin filed for divorce within a week. Not separation. Divorce. Like there was no possibility of working things out, no chance of rebuilding what we'd had. The court ordered a paternity test to make everything official, which felt like adding insult to injury. As if the 23andMe results weren't conclusive enough. During the divorce proceedings, Kevin was frustratingly reasonable. He didn't fight me for the house, didn't ask for spousal support, didn't try to make things difficult. He just wanted out as quickly and cleanly as possible, which somehow made it worse than if he'd been angry and vindictive. At least anger would have meant he still cared enough to fight. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago, and I thought that would be the end of it. Kevin would move on, I'd rebuild my life, and eventually Taylor would adjust to having divorced parents. Plenty of families go through this and come out fine on the other side. But Kevin wasn't done. Last month, I started getting calls from my agent asking about personal issues that might affect my professional reputation. My publisher wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss recent developments related to my public image. I couldn't figure out what they were talking about until I started getting notifications about new reviews on my books. 1-star reviews. Dozens of them. All mentioning my character issues and suggesting that readers might want to reconsider supporting my work. Someone had posted the whole story in Facebook groups for book lovers, on Goodreads forums, even on Amazon review sections. Not just the basic facts, but details about the timeline, about Taylor's reaction, about how I'd hidden the truth for 16 years. It didn't take a genius to figure out who was behind it. Kevin had systematically contacted everyone in my professional network. My agent, my publisher, bookstore owners who'd hosted my events, literary bloggers who'd reviewed my work. He'd told them everything, presented himself as the betrayed husband who'd devoted his life to raising another man's child while his wife built her career on a foundation of lies. My publisher dropped me. My agent stopped returning my calls. Book events were canceled. The novel I'd been working on for 2 years suddenly had no prospects for publication because no one wanted to be associated with me professionally. When I called Kevin to confront him about sabotaging my career, he was calm and matter of fact. "I'm just making sure people know who they're really dealing with," he said. "You built your whole life on deception. I thought your professional contacts should have all the relevant information." Taylor's 17th birthday was last month, and Kevin didn't come to her party. He sent a card and a gift, but he wouldn't come to the house, wouldn't sit in the same room with me, even for his daughter's sake. Taylor tried to hide how much it hurt, but I could see her checking her phone constantly, hoping he'd change his mind and show up. The worst part is how Kevin has pulled back from Taylor too. He still talks to her, still helps with homework over video calls, but their relationship is different now. More distant. Like he can't separate his anger at me from his feelings about her, even though none of this is her fault. Last week, I'd had enough wine and enough loneliness to call Kevin and try to have an honest conversation about where we go from here. Maybe we couldn't save our marriage, but we had to figure out how to coexist for Taylor's sake. "We should get back together," I told him. "Not for us, but for her. She needs both of her parents." Kevin was quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally he said, "Taylor has one parent. You. I was just borrowing her for 16 years. That's when I lost it." "You ruined my career," I said. "You destroyed my reputation over something that happened 16 years ago. You walked away from your daughter because your pride was hurt." "I walked away because my entire life was a lie," Kevin said. "And your career was built on people thinking they knew who you were. I just made sure they had accurate information." He hung up after that, and we haven't spoken since. So here I am, living alone in the house Kevin paid half the mortgage on for 15 years, watching my professional reputation crumble, because my ex-husband decided that destroying my career was appropriate revenge for one mistake I made when I was barely out of college. Taylor is distant now too, spending more time at friends' houses, making excuses to avoid family dinners. She blames herself for buying those DNA kits, but she also blames me for creating the situation in the first place. Last week, she asked if she could spend the summer with my sister instead of staying home with me. I keep thinking about that afternoon with Bruce, how free and intellectual and alive I felt for those few hours. Was it worth it? At the time, it felt like such a small thing. A brief connection with someone who understood me in ways Kevin never could. I never intended for it to hurt anyone. I never planned for it to define the rest of my life. But Kevin can't see it that way. To him, every moment of the last 16 years has been contaminated by that one afternoon. Every birthday party he attended, every bedtime story he read, every proud moment watching Taylor grow up, all of it is ruined for him now, because he knows she isn't biologically his. What he doesn't understand is that biology doesn't make someone a parent. Love makes someone a parent. Showing up every day makes someone a parent. Kevin was Taylor's real father, regardless of genetics. But his ego couldn't handle the truth, so he decided to blow up our entire family, instead of accepting that some things are more important than DNA. Now my career is in ruins, my daughter barely speaks to me, and the man I spent 17 years building a life with acts like I'm a stranger. All because Kevin couldn't handle the fact that his wife had a past before him. Couldn't accept that one afternoon 16 years ago had nothing to do with the family we built together. I made one mistake. One. And Kevin has decided that mistake defines everything about who I am. Everything about what our family meant. He's thrown away 17 years of marriage, walked away from the daughter who worships him, and destroyed my professional reputation because his feelings were hurt. Taylor will be 18 soon, and then she'll be off to college, probably as far away from this mess as she can get. Kevin will continue his new life, whatever that looks like, probably feeling justified in everything he's done. And I'll be here, starting over at 42. Trying to rebuild a career and a reputation that took me 20 years to establish. But I'm not giving up. I'm stronger than Kevin thinks I am. Stronger than this situation. I'll find new publishers, new opportunities. I'll repair my relationship with Taylor. Maybe someday Kevin will realize what he threw away, what he destroyed over something that happened before Taylor could even walk. Until then, I have to focus on moving forward. The past can't be changed, and Kevin's reaction to it can't be undone. But I refuse to let his inability to forgive define the rest of my life. I made one mistake 16 years ago. I won't let that mistake destroy everything I've worked for since then.